I would like to thank you for being here today with us for our event entitled Technology for the Elderly, Challenges and Opportunities, organized by the IEEE SIGHT Montreal. Also, I would like to thank our co-hosts, the IEEE Santa Clara Valley Section Life Members Affinity Group, the IEEE Canada Life Members, and the IEEE Young Professionals Montreal. And I would like to thank our speakers, Dr. Jane Barratt, the Secretary General of International Federation of Aging, IFA, Dr. Alex Mahalidis, Scientific Director and CEO of AgeWell, and Mr. Joseph Way, the Managing Director of Technology Ventures Group. So here I would start to give the word to Diana, the Chair of IEEE SIGHT Montreal, to give us a brief introduction about the IEEE SIGHT and the different activities we do. So Diana, the word is yours.
Thank you. I'm going to share my screen.
Yeah.
So are you seeing my screen? Okay, so thank you, Imen, and good afternoon, everyone. For those who are not familiar with IEEE is the world's largest technical professional organization dedicated to advancing technology for the benefit of humanity. It has more than 400,000 members around the world. So I'm just going to give a brief introduction to IEEE SIGHT. First of all, we need to talk about the IEEE Humanitarian Activities Committee. They provide leadership and resources to inspire and enable IEEE volunteers to carry out and support impactful humanitarian technology and sustainable development activities at the local level. They have funded around 300 projects and events from 2016 and to 2020. And IEEE SIGHT is the Special Interest Group on Humanitarian Technology. It's an initiative operating within IEEE Htech and a global network of volunteers and even non-IEEE members that partner with underserved communities and local organizations to leverage technology for sustainable development. There are around 180 site groups in 53 countries. IEEE Htech, SIGHT, and partners have many funding opportunities. With the pandemic still ongoing, there is a special call for proposals focused on COVID-19 response and pressing community need. As you see, there are many areas that you can think of, and the budget is about from $1,000 to $5,000. And there are also special call for proposals in partnership with IEEE societies. For example, this one is currently available from IEEE Antennas and Propagation Society, and it's up to $3,000. We also have other types of funding opportunities. For example, in Canada, we have special grants from IEEE Canadian Foundation to partially fund one-time new and innovative projects. And the idea is to foster IEEE's mission as well. And there are 3 deadlines per year. So this year, IEEE SIGHT Montreal submitted a project with very talented students from the University of Waterloo. And they are going to develop a portable diabetic retinopathy monitoring system. Diabetic retinopathy is the most frequent cause of new cases of blindness among adults, especially older adults. So it's in fact an example of technology for the elderly. The idea is to develop a non-intrusive and non-dilated imaging diagnostic system that consists of an ophthalmoscope to acquire the images and a software tool to rank the severity of retinopathy. And to kick off this project, we received $1,500. It's just going to start by the end of the year. And so in Montreal, we have a group of passionate volunteers. And if you want to join us, just reach out. We are available for to guide you through the process of submitting a project. And you don't need to be a volunteer to submit a project. If you have any idea, just reach out and we'll guide you through the process. Or if you don't even have time for an open volunteer position, you can contact us and we'll have many micro tasks for all our activities and events. So just this is our email site, montreal@IEEE.org, and this is our website where you can see our activities and projects and events. So if you want to learn more, go to a site website, to IEEE website, or reach out. And so welcome everybody to this panel. So Elaine, you can continue. Thank you.
Thank you for this presentation. So I will share my screen now. So as Diana said, today we're having our event, Technology for the Elderly, Challenges and Opportunities, and we have 3 panelists. I will just briefly introduce to you our panelists. Our first panelist is Dr. Jane Barratt. She's the Secretary General of International Federation on Aging, IFA, an international NGO with general consultative status at the United Nations and its agency, including the World Health Organization, WHO. Dr. Jane is very active in the field of healthy aging through IFA and many other positions she's holding. For example, in WHO COVAX Pillar Vaccine Strategy and the European Interdisciplinary Council on Aging Assembly, and many more. And we have our second panelist, Dr. Alex Mahalidis, who is the Scientific Director and CEO of AgeWell. He's also the Associate Vice President of International Partnerships at the University of Toronto and Professor in the Department of Occupational Science and Occupational Therapy in the Institute of Biomaterials and Biomedical Engineering, with a cross appointment in the Department of Computer Science. I'm hearing a background voice. I don't know from where it's coming. Okay, thank you. And Dr. Mihailidis has been active in the field of technology and environments to support the older adults for over 17 years now. And he has published over 200 articles in this field. And he's also active in the rehabilitation engineering profession and currently the immediate past president of RESNA. Our third panelist is Mr. Joseph Way, the Managing Director of Technology Ventures Group, TVG, which advises startups and corporations on strategy and product innovations. He has previously led enterprise businesses such as the Inventec Corp, Next, Silicon Graphics, etc. He is a very active IEEE member by being an active member in many sections and societies, and he also contributed in many conferences. And currently, he is focusing on partnerships with startups, VCs, corporations, nonprofit, and NGOs in developing innovative solutions for the older adult markets. He has graduated from Tufts University with a BS in electrical engineering and completed professional courses in startup entrepreneurships from Stanford University. So we will start first by Dr. Jane, who will give us a broad, non-technical point of view about this topic. So I will let you share your screen, Dr. Jane.
Thank you very much, Amin, and welcome everybody. Oh, okay. Let's try again. Okay, can everybody see that before I start? Yep, okay. Well, look, thank you very much for the opportunity of being with you today and to Diane and Amin for all of the organisation. You know, passionate volunteers is what we need, you know, as well as experts in the field to drive the change. I'm just going to spend a few minutes and ask you to step outside what you know around older people. The title clearly is Technology for the Elderly, Challenges and Opportunities. But I'm going to just challenge you by asking you to think about, if we were here talking about how to create an enabling environment, would we be doing the same in terms of a life course approach to ageing and older people? The International Federation on Ageing, as Amin said, you know, has been around for about 45 years, and we have a special consultative status at the UN and the WHO. And it's from this perspective that I'm going to talk with you about technology and older people, but really creating this enabling environment, because that's what we need to ensure that people have the value of doing what they can in their environment. So I also like to look at how do we actually build connections across disciplines and sectors, because, you know, my esteemed speakers today, you know, background in engineering, background in ventures. But if you think about architecture, town planning, urban planning, you know, product development, you know, systems technology, we actually need to build bridges and connections across disciplines and sectors towards a common agenda where all older people will have a quality of life. The IFA particularly looks at, you know, policies that are embedded in the community and environment and actually give reason, you know, for a quality of life. So we're really looking at what is it going to take in a person's life to give them the opportunity to be functioning in a different way. You know, all of our work for the next 10 years and beyond will be viewed through the lens of the 4 action areas of the UN Decade of Healthy Aging and also the enablers. And just to give you a reminder, because when we're thinking of technology, these are the 4 areas that the member states, our governments around the world have endorsed. So there is something quite important about thinking about the technology and enabling environments in the context of these 4 areas. Ageism, which is a fundamental barrier, long-term care, primary integrated care, and age-friendly environments. And the enablers that we're talking about, obviously research, data, and innovation, which we're touching on today, but it's also the connecting the stakeholders, and it's leadership and capacity building, and it's the voice and engagement of older people. Rather than tokenism, they are at the heart of the development process. All older people are not the same. We are not a homogeneous group, and we really have to understand the social determinants of health and well-being to really develop innovation that speaks to the issues that an older people may be experiencing, you know, in different cultures, in different countries around the world. So the social determinants of health are critically important. This is the WHO definition of healthy aging, and I put this here as a reminder because it is a process. It's a process of developing and maintaining functional ability. But what do we mean by that? You know, healthy aging is really, you know, the intersection of, you know, intrinsic capacity of a person, you know, the lifestyle decisions, you know, the demographics, the social and economic status, you know, the familial tendencies, you know, embedded within an environment. So we cannot disconnect these two. But we're also talking about a life course approach to aging. We know that aging starts at birth, but across that trajectory, you know, there'll be different milestones that we need to respond to, and perhaps environmental conditions that will impact, for example, pollution impacts the respiratory conditions of millions of older people. You know, today we know that there's over 300 million people with chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. And we know that a person with COPD dies every 10 seconds. And we know that those people, a vulnerable group, and many older people with COPD, you know, at highest risk of COVID, but also influenza, pneumococcal pneumonia. So how can technology reach these people so that vaccines can be administered? Of course, we also think about the three different trajectories an older person may go through in their later part of life. You know, high stable capacity, declining capacity, but also the significant loss of capacity. Technology is an enabler to maintain and improve functional ability. There are three pillars of action in the work that IFA does, and I ask you today to think about them in the context of technology: prevention, access, equity. And with prevention, we're really talking about, you know, before, how can we not be diagnosed with, or how can we prevent fractured neck of femur? Because, you know, the constructs of, you know, homes, affordable living actually responds to the functional changes of an older person. Second, access. You know, much of the issues related to older people is because they're not able to access technology, access health systems, access treatment, access assessments of vision, for example. So how can we bring the assessments to a person's home? Or how can we create technology that will enable, you know, physicians to actually do telemedicine in Canada, across in Somalia? And finally, equity. Equity is a barrier for us all. And when I hear about leaving no one behind, let me remind you, we are leaving people behind now. And it comes back to the social determinants of health, and not only reducing inequities, but ending inequities. So as I wrap up, I give to you a quote from the UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres, who about 6 weeks ago, you know, in talking about the devastating milestone that we have experienced in the world, 5 million deaths of COVID. He said, in a world tested to the limit, we must wake up, change course, and unite. And it's this word unite across sectors and disciplines. You know, when it comes to the development of new technology and innovations, we need to embed in the philosophies, policies, and actions of healthy aging. So thank you very much for the opportunity. I'll stop sharing the screen and hand the floor back to Emin. Thank you.
Thank you very much for this inspiring presentation. It was a good start for the topic. So now we will move to Dr. Alex to give us a more technical point of view about this topic.
Great, thank you very much. And I'm actually not going to use any slides. I know our next speaker has a very nice slide deck put together that will show some interesting technologies, etc. So what I thought I would do with my 5 minutes is really give an introduction to the area of age tech, what that means, the Age Well Network here in Canada, and some of the perspectives that we have moving forward, which I think will build very nicely off of Dr. Barratt's comments, and will lead nicely then into our final speaker of the day, Joseph, who will go over some technology. So first of all, I'm Alex Mahalidis. As you heard, I'm here at the University of Toronto in Canada, and it's really great to be here, and thanks very much for having me. So for the past 8 years, AgeWell has been Canada's premier network for age tech innovation, serving as a collaborative think tank and launching pad for cutting edge research and solutions. We are Canada's technology and aging network. We have co-created over 120 technology solutions by engaging with older adults and caregivers, and over 400 cross-sector partners and industry members. Now, when I talk about co-creation with older adults and caregivers, I'm not talking about some of our typical design processes where we go ahead and build something and then go test it with our target population. These individuals are full members of our research and development teams, and they are part of the work that we're doing right from day one, right to the point of launching it, hopefully as a product. In fact, many of our publications that have come out of my lab and AgeWell actually have older adults and caregivers as co-authors on those papers themselves. We provide innovation implementation and commercialization support to over 250 researchers, 1,000 trainees, 50 startups that we've generated in our first 8 years, and 4 national innovation hubs that all have specific foci across Canada. Most importantly, as I mentioned with older adults, we actually engage close to 5,000 older adults and caregivers across our country in all of our work, as I mentioned. Now, as we all turn to technology to keep us connected, particularly during the pandemic, older Canadians were no different. And typically there's always this misnomer out there that older people are technophobic. They don't want to use technology. They do not wish to engage in telehealth, etc. And if we can take one small positive thing out of the past 2 years, is the fact that I think that we've seen that is not true. Here in Ontario, we went from having no telehealth whatsoever to over a weekend, all of a sudden having a full telehealth system because of the need of the pandemic itself. And as we know, and people often say, sometimes crisis is the best avenue towards innovation. So we want to understand what older Canadians wanted and needed from technology, which we then feed into the work that we're doing. And what we actually found in a survey with over 2,000 older people across Canada is that 72% of those who were polled are actually said they're confident in using technology. 64% of Canadians over the age of 65% also believe that technology can help to lessen the impact of COVID-19 on daily life. And finally, and probably the one that's most surprising to me personally, is that 2/3 of those that were polled said they're willing to pay out of pocket for age tech that allows them to stay at home or their preferred location to age in place. And I think that's a really important aspect, because one of the big barriers we've always spoken about in terms of getting technology into the hands of older adults is, well, who's going to pay for it? Well, clearly, here's a consumer group that is growing, that is changing as the baby boomers become older adults, and therefore it becomes a very viable market, looking at this from a business perspective. So what is age tech exactly? It's really anything from glasses that some of us wear or other low-tech solutions such as hip protectors, to more high-tech software applications, hardware sensors, robots, and smart homes. It includes wearables and voice assistants that help with medication reminders, and let caregivers who may live in a different city or country know how their family member is doing. Age tech is not meant to replace human touch, but is a key tool in our toolbox in improving the lives of older Canadians in Canada and internationally. And that's a really important point. Whether it's a robot or a smart home or a wearable, we need to see these as tools that our family caregivers, our paid caregivers, our healthcare teams are using to provide better care and support and intervention to older people. So in terms of what AgeWell is developing and my research lab here is working on, we do a lot of work around robotics, smart home systems, and artificial intelligence. Specifically, we're looking at robots that can be used as social assistants in the home that can support people with dementia, for example, in their self-care activities. We're also using robots to help with cognitive impairment through the assessment of cognition by essentially automating, but in an animated way using a robot, many of the cognitive screening tests that are available. In terms of smart homes, we're doing things such as health monitoring and physiological data monitoring through non-touch and non-contact based sensors. So for example, we have built sensors that can be embedded into everyday objects in the home, whether it's the sofa cushions, the person's bed, or handrails that allows us to collect ECG from the person, again, without any sensors on the person whatsoever. So you can imagine the power of those kinds of tools that will allow us to collect physiological data to monitor a chronic condition, whether it's congestive heart failure, diabetes, or something else, but also understand the context within which those measurements are being collected as well. Again, we're not diagnosing anything. These are tools and data that can then be used in combination with the system and the healthcare team. Finally, we're doing a lot of work on predictive algorithms. how can we predict changes in a person's health before they actually occur? So for example, and we published a paper on this actually in an IEEE journal a couple of years ago, where just using basic motion and behavior data within a home with 90% accuracy, we are predicting who would develop dementia over a 3-month period. Again, imagine the powerfulness of that kind of tool that allows the care team then to put interventions in place as soon as we can. However, in AgeWell and in myself and my own lab, we have a philosophy that is just not about the technology. You actually need to consider 3 aspects: the technology, the service delivery model, and the policy and regulations that go with that technology itself. The reason for this is, we can design and build the coolest robot possible that does a lot of things, but if we don't understand how it's going to be delivered into the hands of older people and operated, and we don't understand how it's going to be regulated by Health Canada or the FDA, then that robot's just going to sit in our labs. And if you come to my lab, I can show you many robots that are just sitting there collecting dust because we did not consider those 3 aspects. We also need to look at how to move these innovations from the lab to the real world. And this is a significant problem, especially here in Canada. There's 3 main issues that we're facing in terms of delivery and the transfer of technologies from the university labs into the marketplace. The first is the policy and the regulations. Health Canada really has no idea what to do with these new technologies we're developing. For example, if we develop a fall detection system that uses artificial intelligence, Health Canada wants to classify it as a class 4 device, which is the same class they use for implantable devices and pacemakers. Obviously, it's not the same level of invasiveness. So we need to work with the policy and the regulatory bodies here in Canada and elsewhere to understand what these technologies are and what they're going to look like. Second, we need to increase, obviously, funding. We need investment in Canada. We need more VCs, and we need to really be able to promote a lot of the work that Canadians are doing here before they typically leave Canada and go to the US or elsewhere to do their startups. The final piece is the education around these particular topics. A lot of people just don't know what they don't know, right? And that is very much the case when it comes to older people, caregivers, and technology. They don't know what kind of solutions are out there. They don't know how they can be used in implementing their daily lives. So we need to do a much better job as a community around our knowledge translation. Now, finally, and especially in Canada, we need to consider our entire population. Canada is very, very diverse in terms of our cultural demographics, our geography. We go right from urban centers like Toronto and Montreal to very remote locations that we have in the north, including our Indigenous communities. So we need to develop technologies, as Dr. Barratt said, that are inclusive and that are available. And that brings up my final point. In our design process of any of these technologies, we need to include the principles of equity, diversity, and inclusion in everything that we do. And this is the only way that we're going to develop these technologies that are going to be accessible. Access to digital services and literacy must be considered a human right. And this has to become even more important during COVID, where we've seen so many atrocities happen in the care of our seniors. I hope this group, obviously in AgeWell, myself, believe that technology could have played a very significant role in helping overcome many of these issues, and will continue to help to care for our seniors and provide better tools for their caregivers, families, and care teams as well. So I'll stop there. Hopefully that's a nice introduction to Joseph, who's going to show us, I think, some cool tech from the slides I've seen. And again, thanks very much for having me.
Thank you very much for the presentation and great work. And I hope the challenges that, I agree with the challenges, and I hope they get into consideration and they improve towards them. So now we will have a more application and industrial point of view from Mr. Joseph with his presentation. So I will let you share your screen.
I'm still disabled to share the screen. Maybe.
You're not able to share your screen?
Yeah, maybe you can run this. Do you have my slide?
I just have to.
Let me see why it's a host disabled participant. Oh, maybe I didn't join as a speaker.
Oh, yeah, I think.
So if you click on my participant and enable, I can do the sharing then.
Okay. So, you know, the host maybe can make you co-hosts.
Yeah, that will work.
Okay. Diana?
No, I'm a co-host. I cannot give him access, but we have his slides. So.
Okay, can you maybe share his slides?
Maybe I can skip a couple of slides while you're pulling up my slide. I can do the first slide. Actually, is going to show my personal journey. So my experience getting into this space. Actually, when you're ready, just let me know, Diana. Okay. Okay. My personal journey is actually I've been caring for my parents who aged to their 90s. My mom is just turned 98, and my mother-in-law is 94. So as a technologist, and I've always looking for ways actually is both to find technology that benefit them and also benefit me. And in my talk, I mentioned a little bit about the focus is not always about how to just benefit. It benefits the whole family and friends network. Next slide. So you have my front slide. Can you go to the next slide?
Is this the slide you are talking about?
Yeah.
We are just showing the first slide now. Yeah. And you're not in the present mode, with the full screen mode.
Diana, you are on mute.
I'm changing the slides. You are seeing the first one?
Yeah,
only the first one.
Yeah, and it's not in presenting mode. So if you can get into the present mode.
But I don't know. Let's pause this here. Unless.
Actually, you are co-host now, Mr. Joseph, so maybe you can share it yourself.
Oh yeah, thank you.
Okay, that's much better.
Okay, that's my. Can everyone see my first slide? Yes. You can see my first slide.
Yes.
Okay. So my personal journey is I spent 30 years in the tech industry from consumer electronics. Actually, most of my background is in enterprise cloud computing. I used to work for a company called Digital Equipment Corporation, and some of you might still recognize that name as one point number 2 computer company in the world. And then recently in 2014, I started a startup incubator, and got me very interested in helping with startups and corporation and investors in the whole startup ecosystem. And I've been a member of IEEE for over 30 years. I've been a senior member and a member of the Honor Society, HKN, and I chair the IEEE Consumer Technology chapter for this Santa Clara Valley. It's also known as Silicon Valley. And 2 years ago, I actually founded the IEEE Young Professional Startup Special Interest Group in Santa Clara Valley. So this is a combination of my interest and also my volunteer work with IEEE, which is a great organization. So this particular slide, I talk a little bit fast actually, because I like to reserve some time for the Q&A. But all these slides will be available for, I think, after the webinar. So this is basically a slide from United Nations to show the aging population growth of the whole world. So the phenomenon of people living longer, and it's not just a Canadian or US, it's a phenomenon that's happening in every country. And specifically, if you look at the this particular animation chart of the age groups in the United States in the last century, where the people living over 85, a very small percentage, and in about in 2060, it will be almost equal distributed across all the age groups. So this is just my personal view of a few technology trends that I think will make an impact. So it's not these lists are excluding other things. And I think Alex talked about artificial intelligence, and I think this is a technology that started maybe 35, 40 years ago by a gentleman called Ray Kurzweil, based out of MIT, I think in Boston area, where I originally came from. Now with the advancement in both AI chips and also AI software, I think that's going to continue to help, basically provide better analytic of the data that can be used in many different applications. In this case, with the topic that we focus on is for the older adults. Alex also talked about a lot of the invention of the labs. So some of these are really what I call core fundamental technologies. So MEMS and sensor have actually changed so much in the last decade. Mainly is reducing in size. So you can build much smaller, and also with flexible printing circuit, you can actually embed into flexible circuit, make the application much more useful for different applications. As we are in deploying electronics, we always require power. So in the power area, we also have, obviously, solar energy has been the highlights for a lot of different applications, but there's also flexible battery as shown in the top left-hand corner, and the longer-lasting raw material used for battery, and also wireless charging as shown in the bottom right-hand corner. So these are the technology I think that can be repurposed for a lot of solution designing for solution for the older adults. And last but not the least is the wireless communication. I remember when I was at Htech, we have, we're the second largest computer company. Every building's network, all our computers are networked, but you have to be there. But now with 5G, everything is connected through wireless cellular network. And then with Wi-Fi and Bluetooth, or a lot of the devices, wearable devices, can deploy these type of wireless communication. And more recently, in the last 10 years, there are also a new class of very low power, longer distance wireless technology called LoRa, NB-IoT, LTE-M, and also Sigfox, where they transmit basically very small bit, but over much great distance than Wi-Fi, but not as great distance as cellular network. So you can actually have devices that talk through these communication networks with a coin cell battery that lasts up to a year, maybe even 2 years. So some example of the innovation solution for the elderly, again, Alex already talked about a lot of the inventions. So I'm just highlighting some of the applications. So self-driving cars, I think most commercial actually is for the younger professional busy. But another really great application is for the older adults, where a lot of them don't want to have to maintain or just want to have a convenient ride to certain places. There's a company that's invented the smart spoon that was sold to Google, and a lot of people when they get older, they develop, especially people with Parkinson's, so they handshake. So it's very difficult even for them to try to feed themselves. So this is another application of combining sensor technology with the great electronics. Alex talked about home robots. One of the areas I think that is going to be very hot coming up soon is serving robots. So these are the so we've seen some of the serving robots where they bring towels into your room in the hotel. Why not in the homes, right? And for mental health, I mean, one of the things with the older adults is that isolation and loneliness. So VR goggle for older adult to use for traveling, learning things, and this just gives that more mental stimulation. That's another great application. So some of these, what I'm showing you, it's already existing devices, but so this is another one on the top left-hand corner is a smart light. Why is it smart? It is because it produces light that mimics the natural sunlight that will help humans circadian cycle of reacting to the sunlight. But also they have embedded fall detection, wireless sensing. So the person in the room doesn't have to wear a fall detector or wearable device for fall detection. On the top right-hand corner is an interesting technology that I just learned, but it's been around for a few years. So this wearable headband, it uses LED photo biomodulation to help people with Alzheimer and dementia. It's under FDA testing right now, but it's exciting that people are coming up with new technology that can resolve some of these issues for people with I think the statistic is when you get up to 80 and 90 years old, there's a high percentage of people will develop some kind of a brain challenge like dementia and Alzheimer. On the bottom left-hand corner is a very simple. It's a dog. It's a virtual dog. It's developed by a spin-off company from a toy company called Hasbro. So it allows interaction between older adults and the pet without the need to take the pet out for a walk and doing the cleaning and the feeding. And last but not the least, this is an example when some of the technology that existing technology that are being deployed in nursing homes or older adults' home during this pandemic. At least now we have interactions, visual interaction versus the verbal interaction. This is a chart by a company by Karen Atkin. She has this company called DigerianTechnologist.com, and she outlined basically multiple segments of technology segment that can and the number of innovative startups already developing solution for those segments. So I'm not going to go into a lot of this, but again, these slides are available, and you can also go to her website, which is listed on the bottom right-hand corner of the slide. So my final thought is, technology for the elderly does not benefit just the elderly, but family members, friends, and society. So we all can contribute to this cause. Being mindful sometimes not to treat elderly as a homogeneous group, as Jane talked about it earlier. It's like we have infant, baby, young children, and teenagers, right? We group them still by age differently, but in the elderly, I think a better way is to assess their abilities like mobility, cognition, health, and other aspects, rather than designing to a homogeneous group. In the engineering world, there's a new methodology called co-design, which is to invite the people actually going to use the product early on in the process versus, test it and then we modify it afterwards. So please do invite the people, the older adult people in to participate in the design process. And last but not the least, I'm passionate about this particular area is that I think we all can benefit from this innovation, maybe not today, but maybe someday. So I'll stop here now.
Thank you. It was a great presentation. So unfortunately, Dr. Alex has to leave us. He has another appointment on 1, as he wrote in the chat box. So unfortunately, he will not be with us in the question and answers, but we are really thankful for having him here with us today for the presentation. And if you have any questions for him, you can always address him through email that he shared on the chat box. So if any participant has any question, you can write it on the chat box. I will try to address them one by one. But to start this discussion, I would like to have a question for both our speakers. How accessible is this new technology, such as the internet and smartphone and wearables, for older adults?
Joseph, did you want to go first?
Sure. So I basically about 3 or 4 years ago, I went through a sprint to learn as much about this market around the world, because no, apart from IEEE, haven't been a member, because IEEE has membership in 160 countries. So I've developed a great network, so I can always ping people in different countries. How do you solve this problem? So in the United States, well, most recently we have programs, government funding program. So I'm involved with a digital inclusion program specifically in the Silicon Valley, where there's negotiated like $10 a month for low income and older adults to be able to access internet. And that's specifically in San Jose. There's a program where they are provide in the next 10 years. I think there's some noise in the back. So in the next 10 years, they in the city of San Jose, they have worked out with providers, Affinity and also AT&T, to provide 50,000 families, each with a laptop and a year of access, broadband access at home. So they have already deployed, I think, over 3,000 to 5,000 of these computers at home already.
So just building on what Joseph said, I have a slightly different perspective. We know that about 50% of the world are not connected. I think that's the first thing. And I think then we've actually got to understand, why are we connecting? Why are we wearing wearable, devices? For what purpose is it? And we almost, for me, it's about, we go back to function. And whether it's connecting with a loved one, whether it's monitoring blood sugar, whether it's being able to communicate in a way, it has to always come back to improving and maintaining the functional ability of a person. And I think language is very important. The word elderly is not appropriate in some countries. It doesn't work. Older person, older adult, in some countries, elder. So, if this is your market, then it's very important that you not only learn the language, but you actually see this as creating this environment, improving function, and I think that we've got a long way to go in terms of the connections. I mean, I have a 93-year-old mother, cognitively spot on. She will not use any internet, no iPad, no phone, no nothing. So it's as I said at the beginning, older people are not a homogeneous population. And then you've actually got to layer that. Gender plays a big role, socioeconomic status, urban versus rural, ethnic differences, cultural differences. We haven't even talked about those populations that we don't talk about, like older migrants, older women, older prisoners, older refugees, older LGBTQI2S. So there are a lot of different layers when it comes to technology and wearable devices.
That's true.
I skipped the part about the wearable and IoT devices. I think Alex mentioned a little bit about some of the robots in his labs sitting there collecting dust, but because they have not really looked into the delivery and service model. And it's to back up what Jane just talked about, is when you build something, a solution, you have to think about not just the solution itself, is how the user will use it, and also how to deliver the wearable or robot device to that person, because not everybody can afford some of these devices as well.
I think it's really interesting, this conversation, and I don't think we debate it robustly enough. I'm an occupational therapist from 50 years ago, knowing that prosthetics were in wardrobes. People that were amputees, they were given the prosthetics and they didn't use them. And so we really have to understand, when and why people use assistive devices, or whether it's robotics, or whether it's a wearable device. It's about, how do we enable that person to buy into wearing this, and for what reason? So sometimes, I think that Alex's comment about the robots gathering dust, my guess is there's millions of products gathering dust. And it's that transition phase that we just yet have not understood well.
I totally agree. It's like not only technology, we have to have a broader view about all the backgrounds in it. So I totally agree with that. And actually, we have some questions from registrants even before the events. That's how you know how important is this topic. So I'll start with the first question. How much risk is there that the elderly individuals will drawn into an alternative universe view of their reality? What do you think about this philosophical, I would say, point of view about it?
You know, I will be one of them. You know, it's a very it's difficult to understand the intent of the question, right? But if we just look at aging and ageism, and there's three aspects. You know, there's self-identified, there's interpersonal, and there's institutional. So society and ourselves create the stereotypes. So I think that all of us, regardless of age, have different realities from time to time. You know, what we want to do though is we want to live as healthy as we can, and we want to die as graciously as we can with dignity. I don't think there's anybody on the call today that would say otherwise.
Totally agree.
Totally agree with you.
Yes.
This is IEEE actually has another conference a few weeks ago called Global Humanitarian Technology Conference, and I was the moderator of a panel called Technical Innovation for Healthy Aging. So one of the things, having cared for my parents, so I learned from my experiences, you have to plan ahead. So so a lot of it is about education. What we plan in high school, with college, and then college, what we study, and then into what career. But a lot of the planning is not intuitive, at least to me, as to how to live our life past 80 or 90 years old. So we have to revert back to be healthy aging. You cannot just start, oh, I'm 80 years old, now I have to be healthy, because otherwise I get into trouble. Is that you have to plan maybe even 20 years ahead on your living habit, your diet and everything, to make sure that you don't get into some of these health issues, because sometimes it's more difficult to recover as you age versus a younger person.
That's true. It's an accumulation of many years, actually. I totally agree. So moving to the next question is, given the promises made by technology, does it really work to just simplify the interface? It's kind of linked to the first question as like simplifying the interface of the application, for example. Does it solve the problem with elderlies who are not really comfortable with technology and internet?
I take it. Yeah. Go ahead, Jane, please.
Go, Joseph. The short answer is no, it doesn't. There is no cookie cutter solution, because we're not cookie cutters. We come with different wishes and wants and different functional abilities. And I think Mr. Bob Strain, talked about different interfaces, the combination of interfaces, and it comes back to, personal capabilities and personal wishes and wants. So technology is not going to change anything unless behavior changes and there is an end point.
That's true. Anything to add, Mr. Joseph?
Yeah, so the example, so there's so many examples of innovations, right? That's why I showed the example of the smart lighting, right, for fall detection, because a lot of people, what I found through my parents actually, is they don't want to wear a pendant or a wristband to say, hey, they potentially can fall, right? It's a dignity issue. So having a device that will accomplish the function without the person even having to be involved, it's another way to about having a solution, really understanding how the people is going to use or react to the solution. So there are many other examples. For example, there are sensors that can put into the soles of the shoes that can actually detect, predict some of the people who are going to develop a potential balancing problem, other type of issues. So again, the technology should not be obvious to the people. It should be the technology should be transparent to the people actually using it. I think that is the best way that I can explain.
If we can just pick up on that very innovative idea, something in a person's shoes that actually indicates that they may have issues in balance. So one of the ways could be, can they access rehabilitation services, right? So but then can they access them, and what is the cost of them? Or will the devices in the shoes, do they represent some different terrain that this person needs to be? Or does it indicate that some underlying condition? So it's really trying to unpack what the device contributes to, the data of the information around a person. And then, what are the services that need to be put in? So it's not, for me, it's not about a light or even a walking stick but what does this person really want to do, and how can we support them doing that?
That's true. That's true. Actually, I am surprised we have lots of questions, and I am guessing we will exceed the hour. I don't know if you are okay with it for the panelists.
Okay. I'm okay.
Okay, perfect. So the third question is it's a future estimation, I would say. Our registrant is asking, how do you estimate how caregivers will be required in the future? Let's say ratio between the demographic population and needing care amount of necessity. So do you think that the rate will go down by using the technology, or is it gonna be the need for caregivers is still gonna be high?
Look, what we're seeing is we've got to look at the demographic shift. So one is longevity, but with longevity, you get an increase in chronic comorbid conditions, which impacts function. But at the same time, the family caregiver, whether they be a spouse, but also an older adult child, then is balancing grandchildren, job, caregiving, and the technology is an enabler. So it may take some of that time, resources away, but it will never replace, it just complements. I think one of the fundamental issues we're dealing with is our health and social care systems nowhere in the world can support the chronic comorbidities and impact, as well as the demographic shift. So long-term care, which is from services going into the home all the way through to high-level nursing care, it's very expensive, and we still don't have good models in terms of insurance and payment, etc. So, there's a number of different factors that are going to impact. I think my last comment is I see there's a propensity of governments to shift responsibility onto family, and that's because of the cost. And so we have to push back. It should not be an obligation, in my mind. So that's my thoughts around that. Joseph?
I agree.
Yeah, so my wife and I lucky we're able to find very good caregivers actually to offload both of us. But it's a challenge every time we have to find a replacement because some of the health the caregivers actually also get to older age and they retire from that. So I think that the need is will show at least in the short term because of the population curve. That's not enough. I mean, as far as the data from ARP in the United States, we just don't have enough caregivers to support the need right now. Now the thing is, as people start looking at how we can augment some of these through technology, so we have a better efficiency, right? Rather than everything has to be a human touch. So over time, I think we will. Hopefully we'll find some kind of balance. And then the very last part, I think Jane brought up a very good point, and because I think we've been dealing with it. So that some of these, not obvious to, I think, my children or the younger population, because they don't think 50 years down the road they'll be 65 plus. And it's the dignity of graceful aging, right? The last part, for people who are bedbound, people who are really challenged with health issues, and it just requires more and more. Sometimes it requires two caregivers just to take care of one person, and that's taxing to the entire system when you don't have sufficient caregivers. And caregiver training, I think that's also very important, because we have certified program for nursing and other type of thing. And caregiving, I think they are training class. I found some training universities actually have certificates program, but it's not highly popular. Promoted, let me put this point. I think COVID-19 actually has got a lot more people interested in nursing, right? So we are getting a good backfill of resources, but in the caregiving world, I think it's a constant, but the need has been going up and we have a constant supply. So somehow we have to figure out how to bridge that gap.
But I think, Joseph, the salaries are appalling. Why would anybody be a caregiver? Absolutely appalling. And so, this is a system issue. If we're not compensating, people who are doing, really the heavy lifting in supporting older people in residential care, what do we expect? So we've also just been focusing on high income countries. The situation is quite different when we come to lower and middle income countries, where they don't have sophisticated system in many countries. And so the joint family system, then actually, obfuscates, technology. So, it's a big conversation.
Yes, I agree. I think this by itself would be a webinar by itself, I guess, to discuss. So the last question from the registrants, then we will move to the participants. One registrant is about to retire in June 2022, and he's asking if there is any special information for retirees that he can benefit from.
So maybe I can take a first crack at it. So one of the first places, so AARP, the American Association for Rising Possibility. So it used to stand for AARP, American Association for Retired Persons, right? So, but they don't want to say retired person. It's how do you define a retired person? There's actually a venture capitalist by the name of Alan Petrikoff. So he raised a fund specifically for the aging tech market at the age of 83. It was December of 2020. So I think, again, do not treat this group of people as a homogeneous group. So, I forgot the original. If it's in the United States, then get a membership at AARP. I think they dropped the membership criteria down to now at the age of 50. Then you can become a member, and they publicize a lot of great information, even around the world. So I'll let Jane talk about some of the Canadian resources.
No, I mean IFA is in Canada, but we're an international, and I would say to
Sorry about that.
To the gentleman, why do you want to know what? I mean, this notion of retirement is that you're leaving one job and that you're deciding what you're going to do in the future. So there is no specific information, required for retirees. Of course, you go through the necessary things around, wills and investments and finances, but let's stop kind of putting that as a benchmark for something that happens the other side of the fence. Some of the people on this call today may not be in paid work, but every one of you make a valuable contribution to community, society. So this notion of, is there special information? And no, it's not. There's not.
Okay, and for the IEEE, maybe if he reached 100 years of the sum of his age plus his membership, then he can join the life members. So Yeah, so I will move now to the questions of participants. The first question is about, again, the accessibility of technology to elderlies. And the participant is saying that wearable may not be the best choice for the elderly, as it is hard sometimes to wear them and maybe simply forget it. And how about contactless technology? Can it be a solution? Do you see the future of such technologies for the elderly, especially with remote sensing and remote monitoring?
I don't believe we know what the future looks like. And it's not only for elderly, it's across the life course. You know, I do think that there will be a greater and greater attention, you know, for an accessible world, and that goes into health systems, et cetera, and technology to enable you to do what you want. I mean, just look at the phones that we've got now. But I think Joseph's got a better picture of what technology could look like. But it does come down to, let us not have the cookie cutter solution, because it just doesn't exist. And I think my final point before going to Joseph is, Alex made a very important point, and that is that there is no value in being innovative and developing products and systems if it actually is not regulated through the governmental, you know, barriers. So I think, you know, that's another conversation that you might want to pick up at some other stage.
Yeah. As a technologist at heart, and you know, I follow a lot. You know, so again, another plus for IEEE, you know, because they cover so many technologies in the publication. So I show in my slide about power. So one of the new power is wireless power. So there's a smartwatch called Untitled Watch. It's designed by a woman for her mother, because a smartwatch, everybody likes smartwatch, but when oftentimes, not just older adults, even for us, we forget to get charged. It ran out of battery. So it has an extra battery on the wristband. So you only take the extra battery out for charging. But if you can wisely charge all your wearable devices, usually it's low power devices, then you don't even have to worry about wearing the power. So contactless you know, charging is one of the areas, as most of our smartphone, iPhone, Samsung phone all have, you know, wireless charging right now. And there's a lot of other application for contactless, especially I think, you know, with COVID-19. So nobody wants to touch anything. So like the forehead scanner, because you know, we used to use a digital thermometer, right? But now it's just a forehead. So again, going back to Jane's point is, you know, you look at the people who will benefit from it. So it's not, sometimes it's not just the actual older adult, it might be the family members, and then you adopt the best technology around it, and then find the best go to market or the delivery service model, because early part of technology, I mean, even today iPhone is very expensive, right? So but in a way, there's another company based out of China called Xiaomi. They actually want to go after the broader market. So they're the #1 cell phone company now in India, right? With 1.1 billion people. So affordability is, and how to deliver affordable solution to be used by the user, that I think that's important to look at too.
Yes, I agree. And also there is like the passive user, I would say, the ones that they will control the elderly people without them doing like an action in it. I think it's to some extent, like they can do some actions, but at some point the person, the user, have to interact with the application or the interface to give, you know, an appropriate result. So I think it's a limited contribution. It can help, but it's like limited. What do you think about it?
So again, depend on application. So one of the things I think for like the goggle, the virtual reality goggle, is for interaction for this, you know, the older adult, because especially for some, I think there are some companies already developing that for people with dementia, right? Because they lose short-term memory, but they still have very long-term memory, so they can actually simulate some of the the experience that they had many years ago, so they can still feel like they get connected. exercising. There's a very I forgot the name. They show it on TV all the time. Exercise bike that actually help the person to. You don't pedal; they actually pedal for you. Because one thing about people can know is they lose muscle tone, right? Because they don't have much ability to exercise. Even for people in the 90s, it's difficult for them to use, just to lift weights, right? So if you can actually design things to allow them to interact and be able to to exercise, and that will be also for good healthy aging.
That is true. That is true. Anything you want to add, Dr. Jane?
No, I'm going to have to go in a few minutes though, Emin.
Okay, actually, we don't have more questions, I believe. Just like some feedback that I would like to share with you about our discussion. So Mr. Bob is saying that I'm 85, living in a community with average of 87, average age of 87. The biggest dream is to have some way to actually prevent falls. I've seen so many turn abruptly downhill after a fall. More practically, connectivity is limited by the traditional computer interfaces. Easy for me because I have lived with it forever. Others find intuitive interfaces to be totally obscure. I see a combination of interfaces and education being needed. Then, Mr. Key.
A comment to Mr. Strain, and yes, you're quite right in terms of the requirement to prevent falls. And I think what we've got to remember is that with age, the bone density decreases dramatically and balance is certainly impacted. So that's why a life course approach to maintaining and improving mobility is so important. And I agree with the mixed interfaces.
Okay. Actually, we have a question from Mr. Kibu. Do you think that affordability, operability, and safety are the key to general acceptance of any product for elders? Do you think that if 5G can play an important role in the equity and accessibility for elders living in cities and remote areas?
So I think I touched upon that a little bit. So 5G is to be able to provide much high speed, and a lot of times, it depends on the application. If it's just a few health transmission health data bits, you don't really need a lot of high speed. But because of the proliferation of 5G everywhere, it will drive the cost down. Like I showed the example of the city of San Jose, which they put together a program when they, because the high-speed broadband provider has to get city permit in order to provide the services to the city. So they work out a program where the service provider would offer basically a very low cost, $10 a month for broadband up to 25 megabit for the people who qualify in that space. So I think there is a first step approach to getting broadband access to every possible segment of the market.
Okay. So actually, Mr. Paul is asking, would the moderators care to debate the notion unless an activity enriches who is in control of it, it will be not rewarded?
I'm sorry that Paul is here to fix his text, because I think that's a very, very important question. And there's something about ethics that underlies this. So I think my understanding is that he's asking that person, that system that controls the activity, then is it going to be rewarded? And the answer is yes. You know, if there is a product or an innovation that will save money that the government puts in place, then it will be rewarded. So, you know, but this is a real ethical question here that Paul has raised. And once again, I think it's a big conversation about ethics, technology, and aging.
That's true.
So coming from the venture side, I think they are what they call social impact funds, not venture funds. So they actually measure on the social impact. I believe Bill Gates actually announced that he has a energy fund that is set up as a social impact fund, specifically focusing on the energy-related type of innovations, because he's speaking to the climate issues that some that is a big issue that everyone in the world is concerned about. So I think this heightened awareness of how to help older adults to age gracefully, it will be heightened in the next decade. United Nations have this new initiative called the 2021 to 2030 as a decade of healthy aging, right? So I hope that will be more interest and support from different groups to for this new ecosystem that we're trying to develop.
Yeah, if I could just, the United Nations Decade of Healthy Aging 2021 to 2030 is actually come together through a resolution of member states all around the world. And it's going to be implemented through regions into countries. And the countries, the governments actually have to report back on, their plans. And the first milestone report is in 2023. So I think it's a very important opportunity that we need to bring into play. So thank you very much, Amin, for the opportunity to be with you. And Joseph, thank you. And to all the people that stayed on the call. I just need to hop off now, okay?
Yeah, actually, I need also to finish the event. We exceeded with 16 minutes already. It was quite interesting debate, I would say. Thank you for both of you and for Dr. Alex also for joining us today. And I don't know if you have any last word you want to say before finishing this event.
Oh, for me, I've given out my email address, joseph.way@ieee.org, for anybody who wants to contact me afterwards. And I see a lot, actually, I recognize a number of IEEE members. So I hope IEEE can play a key role in contributing to this movement, because I think I don't know how many people really, well, for the IEEE members, I think people would know, but for the non-IEEE member, IEEE has a very big impact in the standardization of certain technologies such as Wi-Fi and Bluetooth, which is now ubiquitous for a lot of the basic technology that we use. So hopefully IEEE can also be leveraged to contribute into the technology for the elderly.
Thank you very much. And it was really interesting to have this debate today. I believe it was an interesting one, and I hope the participant enjoyed being with us today. Thank you for holding us with us for extra 17 minutes, I would say. And if you have any questions, you can always contact the speakers or contact us, and we will send the presentations afterwards through mail. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a nice day, everyone.